Hi, I'm Ron Howard, and you're about to have a look at the new DVD release of a film that I'm very proud of, Backdraft. This re-release includes some brand new interviews and I think a little deeper insight into how the film was made. Of course, every time a fire truck goes by, I still get a kind of a surge of emotion and adrenaline, because making the movie was kind of like going to boot camp. It was a very intense experience. All of us who worked on the film, both in front of or behind the camera, if we see each other in the street, if we work together again, it's like we picked up exactly from where we left off. The experience of making this film wound up being a very personal one to all of us in different ways. From a cinematic standpoint, the challenge of putting the characters into the fire and using fire as a character remains one of the biggest problems that I've ever had to solve technically as a director. And one interesting thing is that right at the moment that we were developing our approach to the film and the fires, digital filmmaking was in its absolute infancy. And we thought, you know, it may be time, they may be able to digitally create fire, and that would make our job a lot easier. And we ran extensive tests. And 6 weeks before we were supposed to begin filming the movie, we got the test back and realized that it looked bad, it looked phony, it did not have the intensity of real fire. I then went to Alan Hall, who was our special effects supervisor on the film in terms of the physical special effects, and I said, the test didn't do it. What can we do on the floor? And he said, well, let me set up a fire lab and let me go to work and let's see if we can control this beast. And we did. Thanks to the actors and their courage, cinematographer Mikhail Solomon, who often was wearing a fire suit and was in the flames himself, I remain very proud of the footage that we got, and I can't go by a firehouse without being invited in for a cup of coffee. It makes me very proud every time that I talk to a firefighter and they want to ask me questions about Backdraft. So please enjoy the film and also check out the new interviews. I think they're very interesting. Brian Grazer read this script called Backdraft, and it was a script that was available that we hadn't developed internally, but it was really unlike anything that we had ever read. It was about firemen and the heroism of the fire department and the danger involved, and it just seemed like such an obvious movie that should be made. These guys are the purest form of the American hero. These guys, they're not like cops or sheriff or military guys that go out to save you and to help you, but they also have authority and they have guns. And that offsets a little bit of the danger. Whereas firemen, they have one pure goal, and that is to get out there and to save lives. And many times it can be at the expense of their own life.
I'm going! You go, we go!
Well, I was a fireman. I paid for film school by working for the fire department in Southern California, and so I always wanted to try and come up with a story that I thought could use some of the experiences and some of the stories I had from that work.
Greg had this idea. He'd been at a fire department in Laguna Beach, and somebody had been propelled across the Pacific Coast Highway, 4 lanes, and through the front windshield of a car, which is what we did in the movie, and that's where the idea started.
Actually, I think I was still at UCLA when I wrote a very, very early draft of what eventually became Backdraft, kind of centering it around events in a firehouse and an arson investigation story.
Thanks for coming to my graduation today, brother. Real inspiration.
And at the core of it was always this idea of 2 brothers whose father had died. He was a fireman, and the one is the rookie fireman, and his older brother is the experienced fireman.
I always wanted to do a movie about brothers. And that sibling relationship, the power of that, the conflicts that come out of it.
Roll the hose now! I'm not gonna quit, Steven, you hear me?
I'd witnessed a backdraft happen when I was a fireman, and they're very chilling and creepy things, you know, because they don't give any evidence that they're about to blow.
A backdraft is a situation that occurs when a room is hot and it has burned away all the oxygen. So nothing's on fire because it can't burn without oxygen. So it's just this heat and sometimes some smoke waiting, and it creates this vacuum. And if a firefighter goes along and breaks a window or kicks the door open, there's a sudden rush of air, of oxygen, into that fire and almost instantaneous combustion. It's every firefighter's worst nightmare.
The story is about these guys who are essentially going out and slaying a dragon every day, that it was a very natural leap, I think, to personalizing the fire. And it was definitely written that way. I mean, the fire is written in the script as if it's angry, or it's upset, or it's sneaky, or it's this, or it's that.
It could stalk you, it could suffocate you, it could chase you into another room.
It's in the walls!
It had a personality much like the shark in Jaws.
Ron Howard called me and said, you've got this great script called Backdraft. And I said, that's right, Ron, it's really good. He said, well, I'd like to direct it. And I just about dropped the phone at that point. So it was quite exciting, and then it got put together pretty quickly.
The choice of Chicago as a location for this film, it was Greg's idea from the beginning, and he knew Chicago quite well, and he'd interviewed firemen in Chicago and really liked the tough guy, sort of macho quality of firemen in Chicago.
We really tried to take advantage of the city of Chicago. The funeral march was one example where we had, I think, 9 cameras going, because that was a one-time deal. You can't really back up a procession like this. You better get it or not. And we were so lucky because we really didn't want it to look pretty, and that day it started to rain, and that was wonderful. That's really what we wanted for this funeral. And that's where the city also came to our rescue, because these are not extras, they're real firemen in that procession. So I think everybody felt that was really important.
The talk with Ron, to begin with, at the very beginning, was mostly that we're going to do it in Chicago on location. We'll have to go out and find the places to do it in. So designing basically became a minimal thing. You're going to work within the spaces that you find. So the biggest problem we had was, what do you do with take 2 after you've burned the set? Because this is real fire. You had to do take 2, 3, 4, whatever was needed. So it was all designed by effects to just turn the valves and it all went out.
Fire out!
And I had to just make it with fire retardant paint or chemicals that go over it to slow the fire down. But most of the stuff didn't really burn. And the one set that we did do, which looked like it was burned at the very beginning of the film, where he goes back to inspect it to see what was there, we put phony walls inside the building, which we had previously burned, and set against the walls in the building. So it looked like when you walked through it, with all the debris and everything, it was burned. But when we were through shooting in it, we just took everything out of it, and it was back into its condition as when we first went into it. We went into several places. One of them was an empty warehouse, several stories high. And in there, we set up everything we had to, including the explosions to blow the windows out and everything else like that. And most of our stuff was done there. Then we had the warehouse on what they called Chicago City Studios, which actually was a vacant factory where kitchen appliances were made. That was where we built some other sets. That's where we had a set burned down, as a matter of fact. When you read the script, or when I read the script, I say, oh my God, how are we going to do this? This is impossible. You can't do this. But then you realize, in fact, there is no such thing as a moving picture. It's one still shot next to another still shot next to another still shot. And when you break them down, you can do it because it brings you down to just what the camera is going to see.
Well, that's okay. I'm going to do a shot for this anyway. Cut it open a little bit.
The primary thing that I remember Ron talking about was the reality of firefighters and how to make it as real as possible. Now, this was fraught with peril because the costumes weigh about 85 or 90 pounds, and it was over 100 degrees. Ron approaches things from a very realistic, grounded point of view, so that's the way I approach the costumes.
The actors were sort of back and forth on it because there was, at that point, no film had been done about firefighters in years and years and years, and there was a kind of a question of, do we look cool, or, you know, do we look a little geeky in these coats, these heavy coats, and these kind of flat-brimmed helmets? And ultimately, I just said, firefighters in general, Chicago firefighters in particular, they're cool because we say they're cool. And you guys are cool because you're great actors.
We had a connection with the place that actually supplies all the city uniforms in Chicago. I talked to a lot of firemen, and if you'll notice in Backdraft, a lot of the fire coats are personalized. Everybody has a nickname, like Kurt Russell's character, his name was Bull. And we wrote it on the back, and there were all these little symbols, and everyone had to be personalized and aged down, but we used the real thing. A lot of actors, the costuming is the first layer of finding out who their character is.
Was that before or after you noticed you were standing in a lake of gasoline, you idiot?
Working with Niro was a much more complex understanding to help him find the character. It was very important to him where the costumes were bought and how they were cleaned. I mean, and he was involved in that whole process of how does he take care of his clothes? He lives alone. I mean, he was very involved in how the clothes were wrinkled, and it was really interesting how he approaches the clothes.
Hey.
Hey, Jen. I see Grandma's still with you.
Yeah, she still hates you.
Well, Jennifer came from, you know, the neighborhood, and this was a girl that was, of all the characters, I would say she was the most stylish because she was attempting to move up in the political world. She had ambitions and goals for herself. But if you look at her clothes, they were very classic, professional clothes.
You guys should just try picking up the phone once in a while, you know?
And Rebecca was a wife of a fireman living in a neighborhood with a son.
I didn't know you'd be up so early.
So the only time we sort of took a little bit of liberty is at the dance. And we just sort of wanted to give her a little bit of awareness of her sexuality because it had to do with the dramatic tension of the moment.
We gotta change the view.
What's been most satisfying in a way about the movie is how much firemen have responded to it. I think they found a lot of pride in it. I think it boosted the morale of firemen, hopefully around the world, certainly in the United States.
I traveled with the picture around the world. We had parades with firemen, and I had more people come up to me in tears because they had a family member who was a firefighter who was killed. It was incredibly moving, and they were talking about the power of family. And if you look at the fire departments in general, all over the world, it's fathers and sons and grandfathers and cousins, and you know, there's a whole lineage that goes on.
Yeah, well, recent events and 9/11 in particular, I think has again raised the profile of police and firemen around the country, and hopefully I think the film succeeds in putting the audience into the firemen's world.
I've met more people who became firefighters because of this movie. They saw this movie and they said, I want to be a hero. This is what I want to do. And that's the thing I'm probably most proud of.
Through Catastrophe, through other films, other television shows, I think now firefighters are almost used as icons of a pure form of heroism.
I think I hear truck.
Wait till I finish.
10 gallon is there?
They're all yours.
Here.
You know, as always, you're trying to get actors who you believe in. In this case, I was also trying to get people who I thought would have some chemistry.
What I will.
What, you going to work now?
Oh.
That's up and down, ain't it? That's up and down, man!
Hey, guess that third. Hi, Mom. This one's for you.
I always kind of had Kurt Russell in the back of my mind. I've known him for a long time. We were child actors in the business at the same time. We would bump into each other then, and then we'd cross paths, and we always got along.
Oh, you got it.
I felt that his aggressive, very entertaining, yet totally honest approach to the characters that he plays was absolutely perfect for the role of Stephen.
Kurt just had all of the strength, all of the heroism, all of the angst that this part needed. And it was a tricky thing trying to put together two guys that you could believe to be brothers. You needed to find some physical similarity to the two of them, some symbiotic thing that was between the two of them. And then when we put him and Billy together, the two of them were dynamite together.
If I remember correctly, my brother Alec had read the script, and he said, you should look out for this, and I talked to my agent about it, and I read the script, and somehow it was sort of the right planetary alignment of sort of circumstances that converged and allowed for me to meet with Ron and to ultimately to win the part.
He gave a great audition. He read the best, and I had no idea how physically gifted he is, what a good athlete he is. Which is a huge advantage for this.
There's a number of things that jumped off the page. One was the conflict and resolution in the relationship with the older brother was particularly appealing. In those circumstances, we may have created a brotherly relationship on screen that may have come out better than had I done this with my brother Stephen or with my brother Alec or my brother Daniel.
Hey, Axe, you notice Rugrat?
Know him? I practically raised him. He never calls, he never brags.
Scott Glenn, who plays Adcox, is an everyday, hard-working, no-nonsense firefighter. He loves the job. He loves saving people.
Oh, keep going. More line. I play the senior fireman, who's what they call the pipe man, who's the guy that is on the nozzle and controls it. The pipe is what they call it. So I've really gotten kind of intimate with it, and it's a lot of fun.
Off place of love, and the love is for the firemen and the world of the firemen. And the family of the firemen and their families.
First, to Tim. Despite the fact that he was born with a rather dull expression and a really hideous pair of ears.
My father was a fireman. Worked his way and he became a fire chief and in fact here, well not in Chicago but in the suburb of Chicago.
When I heard that Backdraft was about firemen and that they were looking to shoot in Chicago, my hometown, I did everything in my power to get this role. I had stories to tell, and I wanted the producers and wanted Ron Howard to know that I had experience and I know what the family situation is like. I know what the fireman picnics are like. I went on and on and on and on until he finally kind of said, okay, you ready to read? No, you know.
With the Robert De Niro part, they kept sort of tweaking the script and tweaking and rewriting and rewriting. There was a very interesting Russian actor, a Russian immigrant, that we were kind of interested in for the part. And then suddenly there was a rewrite, and the part became something else altogether. And Robert De Niro's name came up, and then that was that. We just had to have that.
They ran the residue script from both CRISPR's front doors.
Working with Bob, it was such a wonderful opportunity. That was one of those days that really lived up to expectations. He's like a really cool kind of like an engine that just, it takes a while to get going, and we did a bunch of takes.
I just rewrote your contract. Come on over and help us.
But I remember really vividly, after about take 6 or 7, it was just cooking like I've never experienced before.
Okay, you see that patch of shirt right there?
You know, he would change something. I'm talking about little details, little moments. He'd try it a different way, and he would make me react a different way. It was real organic, and it was really cool.
He had a slew of pipes. So basically what De Niro wanted to do is have Ron shoot him holding different props and whatnot. And you'd use these different pipes. One was like a Sherlock Holmes kind of pipe that he just held in his teeth. And they were filming him, and I thought, well, what does he do? I mean, there's no dialogue. He's just doing it on his own. There's no sound. And he would just put the pipe in and just kind of look around and take in the environment. And to see sort of the need for detail that he had was really inspiring, and I never forgot that.
He knew that this was Billy's, first big major starring part in the film with a formidable group of actors. And Donald was just so generous with him and would spend time with him at lunchtime running lines and talking about the part.
All right.
Well, I remember sort of struggling to try and get to the emotional destination. Donald came in and had to shoot this one scene. I think he was there in and out, flew in, shot it for a day or a day and a half, and then left, and that was it. He was just wonderful.
Did the fire look at you?
And of course there was Rebecca De Mornay and Jennifer Jason Leigh, but they were outnumbered.
So what have you been up to?
Well, I work at City Hall, actually. I was doing a movie in Vancouver. I got a call from my agent, and she said that Ron Howard wanted to speak to me about a movie, which was very exciting because I love Splash so much. And so we had a brief but really nice phone call, and I was working on this other film, so I said, I don't know if it's even possible. And also, I was still really young, so I had never had that experience of just being offered something and being cast in something.
We're starting to get the feeling that your office is dragging out this case.
He had this kind of faith in me that I could do this part. So they arranged it so that I just was like flying back and forth from Vancouver to Chicago. And they had to work around this other film's schedule completely. But they were really easygoing about the whole thing. I love J.T. Walsh.
I really felt that, if we were going to do a movie in 1990 about firefighters, people were going to demand realism. I just mentioned to the casting director, I'd love to get just 1 or 2 people in the company who actually are firefighters.
And once I got to Chicago and started interviewing all the guys who were firemen and moonlighted as actors, it was phenomenal.
I came on the job in '78. I had taken the test in '76. And in the meantime, I was doing acting and working other jobs. So I came out of the academy and went to a busy engine company, Engine 43 on the northwest side. Went to a lot of fires then, and I came south to a busy truck company, Truck 11. So I've been getting some good experience. I know exactly what I'm doing.
Shake and bake, boys. I think we got a barbecue.
There was kind of a boot camp. First, we went through a period of maybe a week when we were sort of taught by the Chicago firemen the kind of stuff that you're taught at the academy.
Well, you just learned everything. You learned how to use the ladders, you learn how to put them up, learn how to use the hoses. There's a way that it has to go up, and you hook them together. How to read the fire. That's basically, how to read different types of smoke and flame, when to know when things are going to start caving in, how to breathe near the nozzle to get some air, how to move in a building blind, how to look for victims. Just all aspects of basically how to approach and fight a fire.
At night, we would sleep over the firehouses and go out on calls with them and have an opportunity to implement the skills that we had learned throughout the course of training. And we did that, I think, for about a month.
What's really interesting about it is that you're totally at rest and asleep, and the klaxon goes off, and 3 minutes later your adrenaline is just going right through the roof. You're riding on that truck, and the siren's going and it's blazing, and you're cutting through Chinatown, and all the lights were going, and you're on your way to a fire.
Of danger.
You learn to have a lot of respect for fire, because I remember going in the first few jobs I went into, and you take this cold line of water and you shoot it up over your head, and 2 seconds later it comes back down as scalding water if it comes back down your neck. I mean, that's a force that, that you're not aware of until you come in close contact.
Thing.
across the cast, across every department. Everybody was, wanted to give 110% for Ron, but also for the Chicago Fire Department specifically, and firefighters in general. Once the crew had connected with the Chicago Fire Department and got to see who they were and what they were all about, and got to know them on a level of intimacy that they had never experienced before. They were really fighting to tell their story.
For every policeman that dies on the job, there were 5 firemen who had died on the job. You realize these guys shouldn't be taken for granted for what they do. They're just there to serve. That's their mentality. They're a very sort of rough brand of humanitarian, and it makes them really unique in today's society.
It goes back to the beginning, even as a young kid, knowing there was something superhero-ish about these men, and it boils down to courage. It boils down to bravery and facing your fear and going in and risking your life. But that's why that movie was made. It's why Backdraft was made.
I mean, I still go down the street and, engine 40, truck 35 goes by, or engine 74 goes by, and the boys toot the horn and give me the thumbs up for what we did for them, I suppose.